Eliza Bennett gripped the phone with a white-knuckled fury, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the polished surface. "This is an outrage," she shrieked, her shrill voice echoing across the idyllic farmland. "Those farm animals are disrupting the peace of our community, and I won't stand for it a moment longer." Little did the HOA president know, her meddling was about to spark a chain of events that would leave her reeling. Eliza stormed out of her immaculate suburban home, her designer heels clicking against the pristine sidewalk. She marched toward the dilapidated farmhouse next door, her eyes narrowed in contempt. The ramshackle barn, the overgrown fields, the cacophony of animal sounds. It was an eyesore, an affront to the carefully curated aesthetic of Willow Creek Estates. "Excuse me," Eliza barked, rapping her knuckles against the weathered wooden door. "I need to speak with the owner of this property immediately." The door creaked open, revealing a young woman with sun-kissed skin and calloused hands. "Can I help you?" she asked, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Yes, you can," Eliza snapped. "Your farm animals are disrupting the peace and quiet of this neighborhood, and it needs to stop. I'm giving you 24 hours to remove them, or I'll be forced to take legal action." The woman's eyes widened in disbelief. "Remove them. But these animals are my livelihood. I can't just." "I don't care about your livelihood," Eliza interrupted, her voice dripping with disdain. "This is an upscale community, and we have standards to maintain. Now you have your warning. I suggest you heed it." With that, Eliza turned on her heel and stormed back to her immaculate home, leaving the young woman standing in the doorway, stunned and uncertain. That evening, as Eliza sat in her living room, sipping a glass of Chardonnay, her phone began to ring. She glanced at the caller ID and felt a surge of triumph. "This is Eliza Bennett," she answered, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Mrs. Bennett, this is Officer Ramirez from the Willow Creek Police Department. We've received a complaint about your neighbor's farm animals causing a disturbance. I'm afraid I'll need to come by and investigate." Eliza's lips curled into a satisfied smile. "Of course, officer. I'll be sure to point out the exact location of the nuisance. Thank you for your prompt attention to this matter." As she hung up the phone, Eliza couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. Those farm animals would be gone within the day, and she would once again reign supreme over her precious little community. The young farmer, Sarah, stood by helplessly as the police cruiser pulled up to her property. Officer Ramirez stepped out, clipboard in hand, his expression stern. "Ma'am, I've received a complaint about the disturbance your farm animals are causing in the neighborhood," he said, his tone professional but firm. "I'm going to need to conduct an inspection." Sarah's heart sank. She knew exactly who had made the complaint, and the thought of losing her beloved animals filled her with dread. "Officer, please understand, these animals are my livelihood. I can't just—" "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I have to follow up on this complaint," the officer interrupted. "If there is indeed a disturbance, I'll have to issue a citation and order you to take corrective action." With a heavy sigh, Sarah led the officer around the property, pointing out her small herd of dairy cows, a few chickens, and a couple of goats. "As you can see, they're just going about their business. I keep them well contained, and I make sure they don't cause any trouble." Officer Ramirez jotted down a few notes, his brow furrowed in concentration. After a thorough inspection, he turned to Sarah, his expression sympathetic. "I understand this is your livelihood, ma'am, but I'm afraid I have to side with the complainant on this one. The noise level is a bit too high for a residential area. I'm going to have to issue you a warning and ask that you take steps to mitigate the disturbance within the next 72 hours. Sarah's heart sank. "But officer, I'm sorry, ma'am, but those are my orders," the officer said, holding up a hand. "I know it's not an easy situation, but I have to enforce the law. If the problem persists, I'll have no choice but to issue a citation and possibly even confiscate the animals." With that, the officer returned to his patrol car, leaving Sarah standing in the middle of her farm, her eyes filled with tears of frustration and worry. She knew Eliza Bennett was behind this, and she was determined to find a way to save her beloved animals. As the police cruiser pulled away, Eliza watched from her living room window, a smug smile on her face. "That's what you get for disrupting the peace of this community," she muttered under her breath. "Soon, those eyesores will be gone, and I'll have my perfect neighborhood back." Little did Eliza know, her meddling was about to backfire in the most delicious way. Sarah paced back and forth in her farmhouse kitchen, her mind racing. She couldn't bear the thought of losing her animals, her livelihood, her very way of life. This was more than just a fight for her farm. It was a fight for her freedom, her independence, her sense of self. Suddenly, a spark of inspiration ignited within her. She hurried to her desk, rifling through the drawers until she found a worn, leather-bound notebook. Inside were the meticulous records she kept of her farm operations, including detailed information about the animals' noise levels and their impact on the surrounding environment. "This has to work," Sarah murmured, flipping through the pages. "It has to." The next morning, Sarah arrived at the Willow Creek Police Department, her notebook clutched tightly in her hands. She steeled herself, taking a deep breath before stepping through the doors. "Excuse me, I need to speak with Officer Ramirez," she said, her voice steady. The receptionist eyed her with a hint of suspicion. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but this is important," Sarah insisted. "It's regarding the complaint he responded to at my farm yesterday." The receptionist hesitated for a moment, then nodded and picked up the phone. "One moment, please." Within minutes, Officer Ramirez emerged from his office, a curious expression on his face. "Ms. Wilkins, what can I do for you?" Sarah took a step forward, her eyes pleading. "Officer, I understand you have to follow up on the complaint about my farm animals, but I wanted to provide you with some additional information that might help." She opened the notebook, flipping to the relevant pages. "As you can see, I've kept detailed records of the noise levels, the animals' impact on the environment, and the steps I've taken to mitigate any potential disturbances. I can assure you that my farm is well maintained and that my animals pose no threat to the community." Officer Ramirez took the notebook, his brow furrowed in concentration as he pored over the pages. "This is quite impressive, Ms. Wilkins. I can see you've put a lot of thought and effort into managing your farm responsibly." Sarah nodded, hope flickering in her eyes. "I know the noise can be a bit much at times, but I really do try to keep it under control. These animals are my livelihood, and I can't just get rid of them. Please, officer, is there anything I can do to avoid a citation or having them confiscated?" The officer was silent for a moment, his fingers drumming against the notebook. Then, a small smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "Well, I'll have to review this information more thoroughly, but I think we might be able to work something out." Sarah's heart soared, and she let out a sigh of relief. "Thank you, Officer Ramirez. I really appreciate your willingness to listen." As she turned to leave, a sense of cautious optimism filled her. Maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to save her farm and her way of life. Eliza Bennett paced back and forth in her living room, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the arm of her designer sofa. It had been 2 days since she had filed the complaint against her neighbor's farm, and she was growing impatient. "Where are those blasted animals?" she muttered, glaring out the window at the seemingly serene farmhouse next door. "They should have been removed by now." Just then, her phone rang, and Eliza snatched it up, her heart racing. "Hello?" "Mrs. Bennett, this is Officer Ramirez from the Willow Creek Police Department," a familiar voice replied. "I'm calling to follow up on the complaint you filed regarding the farm animals next door." Eliza's lips curled into a triumphant smile. "Yes, officer, what's the status?" "Well, ma'am, I've had a chance to review the information provided by your neighbor, Ms. Wilkins," the officer said, his tone neutral. "It seems she's taken significant steps to mitigate any potential disturbances caused by her animals." Eliza's brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" Those animals are a nuisance, and they need to be removed immediately. I understand your concerns, Mrs. Bennett, Officer Ramirez replied, but based on the evidence Ms. Wilkins has presented, I don't believe the animals are in violation of any local ordinances. In fact, her farm appears to be well managed and in compliance with all relevant regulations. Eliza's face flushed with indignation. But officer, this is an upscale community. We have standards to maintain, and those animals simply don't belong here. I'm sorry, ma'am, but I'm afraid I can't take any action against Ms. Wilkins or her farm, the officer said, his voice firm. Unless there is a clear and documented disturbance, I have no grounds to issue a citation or order the removal of the animals. Eliza felt her blood boil. This is outrageous. I demand that you do something about this immediately. I understand your frustration, Mrs. Bennett, but my hands are tied, Officer Ramirez said, his tone apologetic. I would suggest speaking with Ms. Wilkins directly to see if you can reach an amicable solution. With that, the line went dead, and Eliza was left staring at her phone, her face twisted in a mask of pure rage. This isn't over, she growled, her eyes narrowed in determination. I'll find a way to get rid of those animals if it's the last thing I do. The following morning, Eliza Bennett stormed out of her house, her designer purse clutched tightly in her hand. She marched across the perfectly manicured lawn, her high heels clicking against the pristine sidewalk, until she reached the crumbling wooden gate of the farmhouse next door. With a haughty toss of her perfectly coiffed hair, Eliza rapped her knuckles against the weathered door, her jaw set in a determined line. The door creaked open, and Sarah Wilkins peered out, her expression wary. Mrs. Bennett, she said, her voice calm but guarded. What can I do for you? You can start by getting rid of those abhorrent animals that are ruining the peace and quiet of this community, Eliza spat, her eyes narrowed in disdain. Sarah's brow furrowed, and she shifted her weight, planting her feet firmly on the worn doormat. I'm sorry, but I can't do that. Those animals are my livelihood, and I've taken every step to ensure they don't cause any disturbances. Eliza let out a derisive snort. Oh, please. That's what you told the police, and they bought it, didn't they? But I'm not so easily fooled. She took a step forward, her manicured finger pointed accusingly at Sarah. I know you're kind, Ms. Wilkins. You think you can just roll in here with your filthy animals and ruin everything we've worked so hard to build. Well, I won't stand for it. Sarah's eyes widened, and she felt a surge of anger rise within her. How dare you? This farm has been in my family for generations, and I take great pride in the work I do here. If you have a problem with that, then I suggest you take it up with the authorities. Oh, I intend to, Eliza said, her voice dripping with venom. And this time, I'll make sure they listen. With that, she turned on her heel and stalked back to her immaculate home, her mind already whirring with a new plan of attack. Sarah watched her go, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew Eliza Bennett was a force to be reckoned with, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. As Eliza settled into her plush leather chair, a malicious grin spread across her face. No one defies Eliza Bennett and gets away with it, she murmured, her fingers drumming against the polished wood of her desk. Time to bring in the big guns. The next morning, Sarah awoke to the sound of sirens blaring in the distance. Her heart raced as she hurried to the window, peering out at the chaos unfolding on the road leading to her farm. Flashing lights and a cacophony of voices filled the air as a procession of police cruisers, fire trucks, and what appeared to be a hazmat team pulled up to the entrance of her property. What on earth? Sarah murmured, her brow furrowed in confusion and alarm. She rushed outside, her bare feet crunching on the gravel as she approached the gathering crowd. Officer Ramirez, she called out, waving to the familiar face. What's going on? The officer turned to her, his expression grim. Ms. Wilkins, I'm afraid we've received an anonymous tip about a potential environmental hazard on your property. Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. Environmental hazard. But that's impossible. I've taken every precaution to ensure my farm is in full compliance with all regulations. I understand your concerns, ma'am, Officer Ramirez said, but we have to treat this as a serious situation. We've been ordered to conduct a thorough investigation and take any necessary measures to ensure the safety of the community. Before Sarah could protest, a team of hazmat-suited individuals began swarming the farm, their equipment whirring and beeping as they scanned the perimeter. Sarah watched in horror as they approached the barn, her heart pounding in her chest. "This is outrageous," she cried, turning to the officer. "You can't just barge in here without a warrant." Officer Ramirez held up a hand, his expression apologetic. "I'm sorry, Ms. Wilkins, but the order came directly from the mayor's office. We have no choice but to comply." As the hazmat team began erecting a makeshift decontamination zone, Sarah's eyes darted toward the nearby woods, where she knew her beloved animals were grazing. "You can't take them," she shouted, her voice cracking with emotion. "Those animals are my life." But her pleas fell on deaf ears as the officers moved in, their faces obscured by the hazmat suits. Sarah watched helplessly, tears streaming down her cheeks as her farm was overrun by the chaos of the investigation. Somewhere in the distance, a triumphant smile spread across Eliza Bennett's face. "Checkmate, Ms. Wilkins," she murmured, her fingers tapping against the polished surface of her smartphone. As the hazmat team swarmed Sarah's farm, she stood by helplessly, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and fury. She watched in horror as they began corralling her animals, loading them onto a series of livestock trailers. "No, please," she cried, her voice cracking with desperation. "You can't take them. They're my livelihood." But the officers ignored her pleas, their expressions hidden behind the opaque visors of their hazmat suits. Suddenly, a familiar face emerged from the chaos. Officer Ramirez, his brow furrowed with concern. "Ms. Wilkins, I want you to know that I'm not comfortable with this situation," he said, his voice low. "But I'm under strict orders from the mayor's office to cooperate with this investigation." Sarah's eyes widened, a glimmer of hope flickering within her. "Officer, please, you have to help me. Those animals are everything to me. I can't lose them." Ramirez let out a heavy sigh, his gaze shifting to the scene unfolding around them. "I wish I could, Ms. Wilkins, but my hands are tied. My superiors are the ones calling the shots here." Sarah's shoulders sagged in defeat, and she felt a wave of hopelessness wash over her. "Then what am I supposed to do?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ramirez hesitated for a moment, then leaned in closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Listen, I can't officially help you, but I might be able to give you a clue. There's been a lot of behind-the-scenes maneuvering on this case, and I have a hunch that it's not as straightforward as it seems." Sarah's eyes narrowed with determination. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that you might want to dig a little deeper," Ramirez replied, his gaze darting around nervously. "There could be more to this than meets the eye." With that, he turned and rejoined the other officers, leaving Sarah to ponder his cryptic words. As she watched her beloved animals being loaded onto the trailers, a spark of defiance ignited within her. "I'm not going down without a fight," she muttered, her fists clenched at her sides. Time to uncover the truth. Meanwhile, in her immaculate suburban home, Eliza Bennett sat back in her chair, a self-satisfied grin plastered across her face. "That's what you get for crossing me, Ms. Wilkins," she murmured, her fingers tapping against the polished wood of her desk. No one defies Eliza Bennett and gets away with it. Little did she know, her victory was about to be short-lived. As the sun began to set, Sarah Wilkins found herself in an unexpected ally. Officer Ramirez. He had discreetly pulled her aside, his expression grave. "Ms. Wilkins, I've been doing some digging, and I think you need to know the truth about what's really going on here," he said, his voice low and urgent. Sarah's heart raced as she listened, her eyes widening with each revelation. It seemed that Eliza Bennett had orchestrated the entire environmental hazard investigation as a means of shutting down the farm and seizing the property. She's been scheming with the mayor's office and a local developer to have your farm condemned and turned into a luxury housing development. Ramirez explained, his brow furrowed in disgust. This was all a carefully crafted plot to get rid of you and your animals. Sarah's hands trembled with a mix of fury and disbelief. That conniving, manipulative witch. I knew she was behind this, but I had no idea the extent of her corruption. Ramirez nodded gravely. I'm sorry I can't do more to help, but my hands are tied. If I go against the mayor's orders, I could lose my job. I understand, Sarah said, her eyes steely with determination. But I'm not going down without a fight. This is my land, my legacy, and I'll be damned if I let Eliza Bennett take it away from me. With a newfound resolve, Sarah sprang into action. She reached out to local media outlets, exposing the truth behind the environmental hazard investigation. Within hours, the story had gone viral, sparking outrage and public scrutiny. Eliza Bennett's carefully crafted scheme began to unravel as the community rallied behind Sarah and her farm. The mayor's office was flooded with calls and protests, and the developer's plans for the luxury housing project were put on hold. As the sun rose the following morning, Eliza Bennett found herself on the wrong end of a tidal wave of public backlash. Her reputation in tatters, she watched helplessly as her prized suburban paradise descended into chaos. Meanwhile, Sarah Wilkins stood defiantly on her farm, surrounded by her beloved animals. She had won the battle, and the sweet taste of karma was all the sweeter. You can't keep a good farmer down, she said, a triumphant smile on her face. Especially not when you have the whole community on your side.